There's a line in Conan the Barbarian, a phrase that's always intrigued me. The riddle of steel. It's intrigued a lot of people. Blacksmiths like to use it. Martial artists like to use it. Knife makers especially like to use it. It's an intriguing phrase. It's not immediately obvious what it means. I think that's part of its appeal. It comes from the opening scene in the movie, the first bit of dialogue. Conan's a small boy, and his father takes him up on top of a mountain and explains the worldview of his people. And I saw the movie so many times when I was a teenager that I can probably still do it from memory. Let me see. Fire and wind come from the sky, from the gods of the sky. But Crom is your god. Crom, and he lives in the earth. Once giants lived in the earth, Conan. And in the darkness of chaos, they fooled Crom and took from him the secret of steel. And Crom was angered, and the earth shook, and fire and wind struck down these giants, and they threw their bodies into the waters. But in their rage, the gods forgot the secret steel, and left it lying on the battlefield. And we who found it are just men. Not gods, not giants, just men. The secret steel has always carried with it a mystery. You must learn this riddle, Conan. You must learn this discipline. For no one in this world can you trust. Not men, not women, not beasts. This you can trust. Now, you do that speech, you talk about that movie, and everybody always rolls their eyes. That's a serious mistake. The source material's got a lot to it, but the first draft of that movie was written by Oliver Stone. His script was rewritten by John Milius. John Milius is the man who wrote Apocalypse Now. Like, these guys aren't hacks. Anything that's in that narrative is in there for a reason. Now, if you parse that speech, you notice that the riddle of steel is not given, it's not defined. Conan's father doesn't say you must answer the riddle of steel, you must learn the riddle of steel. Whether it's a question without an answer without a question, it's kind of like the ultimate question. We found the answer to the ultimate question, but we never bothered to figure out what the question itself was. It's got a lot in it. Whoever wrote the dialogue is obviously pretty well read. There's echoes of Norse creation myths, of other creation myths, giants cast into waters forming the earth. It's just a captivating phrase. There might not be anything to it more than that, just catchy writing. Good storyteller knows it's better to leave stuff out than to fill in too much. I mean, look what happened with Star Wars. But a captivating phrase like that seems to demand an answer, so you spend a lot of time thinking about it. Swords are a very useful metaphor for a lot of things. For rectitude, for courage, for danger, for conflict, for responsibility. They have varying qualities, much like human beings. Like, they're a useful metaphor. Use them a lot. Steel itself is a fascinating substance. It was fascinating to the ancients. It's fascinating today, even more so today. You dig into it empirically, and there's no end to it. It's one of those subjects you can pursue as far as you care to. There's always more to understand or decipher. It's interesting metaphysically, it's interesting scientifically. Like, steel is an alloy. That's a metal combined with something else. In steel's case, it's iron plus carbon. Iron's interesting all by itself. I think of it as a star metal, not only because we find it in meteorites, falling stars, but main sequence stars like our own sun spend their entire lives smelting iron and fusing hydrogen in their cores into heavier and heavier elements, and the end product of this chain is iron. Anything heavier than that happens in the moment of the star's death when it goes nova. So when you dig iron out of the ground and make something out of it, like iron, that's the heart of a dead star. Like, that's kind of a lot. Then the other part of steel is carbon. Think of carbon as the god atom. That's the element that gives us life. You can make more stuff out of carbon than you can out of everything else combined. It's incredible. So you put the two of them together, iron with a little bit of carbon, and you get steel, which is a polymorphic allotropic substance. That means it can exist in more than one phase at the same, under the same conditions, and that phase can be changed forwards and back. You can make it soft and then hard and then hard and then soft just by messing with one of the variables of pressure or temperature or even time. It really is magical in a way. Like Robert Heinlein said about metallurgy. It's on the Trojan point between science and black magic. As a blacksmith, you have an intimate relationship with iron and with steel. It's your medium, it's what you work in. Like sometimes your sweat and blood really feels like it's in what you make. So that line with the riddle of steel, like in many ways steel itself is a riddle. It does carry a mystery. And the fact that it can have so many different qualities that gives it a bit of a personality. Again, it's a good metaphor for human beings. Like a sword, you want it to be resilient, but still needs to be sharp, needs to be hard, needs to bend without breaking. Now, when you dig into steel in a technical sense, that's when it becomes really fascinating, not just scientifically, but metaphysically. For instance, the point past which steel won't recover from being bent is its deformation limit. Now, obviously, you can make steel springier or softer, so you can change the point at which it won't recover. But the point past which it will stay bent is not a fixed point. It's a range. It's got a lower deformation limit and an upper deformation limit. And below the lower deformation limit, it recovers fine. In between the two, it recovers a little bit. And past the upper deformation limit, it just stays bent. It doesn't recover at all. Or breaks if it's too brittle. But the fascinating thing is, if you stress steel, if you flex your well-tempered sword just below the lower deformation limit, if you do this repeatedly, it has the effect of raising that limit. The steel literally becomes stronger by being stressed. And I think that's a very useful metaphor. I think that's probably the closest thing we have to the actual riddle of steel, if you want to find out what that actual question was. Like, how can you endure past your limit? How can you take more than you can take? And the answer provides the question. The question likewise points to the answer. You surpass your limits by testing your limits. As you get close to your limit, but not exceeding it, that limit moves a little further away. What is the riddle of steel? How can I endure more than I can endure? And the answer, by standing all I can stand.